this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a digital marketer in life sciences. And so with that, let me just bring in my guest really quickly. In this episode of Life Science Success, my guest is Kristien Van Vlasselaer. We even practiced this beforehand. So she's the vice president of operations at Gordian Biotechnology, who is a passionate generalist and strategic operations leader dedicated to helping biotech teams execute with excellence. So with that, welcome, Kristien. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So, before we dive in too much, what was it that led your career to life sciences? What sort of, brought you, from anything else that you possibly could have done to life sciences?
Good question. I grew up with a scientist, and so a lot of scientific conversations were had at our dining room table constantly, and I've always been very curious and excited to learn. And so science is a kind of a bottomless pit of learning opportunities, right? So if you're curious about anything, you can get down to some sort of scientific principle to explain it. So it was a combination of curiosity, probably early and frequent exposure, and then an attempt to be a veterinarian in undergrad that I very quickly realized, like, oh God, no, this is not this is not the thing I want to do. And then what does one do with a animal science degree? And so, yeah, did some research in a couple of different labs and just caught the curiosity science bug.
Well, very good. And we were talking about this beforehand as well, right? A part of your intro, I said that you were, a generalist as well. I was saying that, I've had people call me the same as well. So, what is it that led you to being a generalist powerhouse in the biotech industry as well?
Yeah, it's funny. Generalist, I feel like, is just like an attempt at professionalizing the word scrappy. The more I think about it, like if you put me in any situation, I will find some sort of scrappy way to deal with it. And I think generalism gets conflated with like, well, master of none kind of thing, right? And I just don't find that to be the truth, and at least not for me. I very much like to have enough technical expertise in whatever areas I require to get the job done. So yeah, I also probably assign some of it to late ADHD neurodivergent diagnosis, where did not know that my brain had maybe not always been playing by the rules, let's say. But I get bored quickly. I have to be interested in what I'm doing. And so an attempt to shove me into too small a box or too small a space does not me or anyone that I could potentially be helping. So generalism it is.
Yeah, I remember the first time hearing that term for me, and I definitely took offense to it as well. But whenever you sort of see all the stuff that you can do and all the places that you can play, that's the, I guess, I kind of understand whenever there's so many people in our field in life sciences that have really one strict lane that they play in, and they don't really, diverge, right? So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how did your career evolve, as you sort of think about being a holistic change maker and, some of the key milestones that have shaped your journey? What was it that, sort of led you down the path that you are? Tell us a little bit more about your overall journey.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Bay Area, around biotech, around startup biotech, and got kind of tangential exposure to innovation and entrepreneurial mindset. Always liked it. I worked at a startup right out of college. Really enjoyed that. I got to see this group of like 15, 20 folks undergo an acquisition. So that was really interesting. And then I got enough time at that pharma to understand that I was not necessarily meant for big boy company. Doesn't necessarily jive. And then went and did a PhD, enjoyed that. About halfway through, we lost funding. And so I crowdsource funded part of my PhD. But don't recommend the stress of that necessarily, but it was a great experience, learning experience and otherwise. And that I really had to like go out and find people that were willing to pay me to continue to do my PhD, which fascinating, but it's a much more widespread issue than anyone wants to admit. I really enjoyed doing that, actually, like telling a story and talking to lots of people about what I did and why. Went on to do a postdoc in traumatic brain injury and really loved that, but also realized pretty quickly into my PhD and then somehow had to like beat the lesson into my head a little more with a postdoc. Like, you don't actually like bench work. Newsflash. And I was like, okay, how many years do you need to really get that message across? Apparently it's about 7. But yeah, it was a good experience because I got stuck, right? I was like, okay, what do I do now? You have a PhD and a postdoc. You are in theory incredibly well trained to do one thing or a handful of things. What do you do with it if that's not the thing you want to be doing? So I got lucky. My PI for my PhD reached out and said, listen, I'm doing this life science consulting stuff. This is your jam. And I was like, does it pay more than a postdoc? Because yes, I will do that thing. And so I did. I got lucky enough to work for Booz Allen Hamilton, and they are, defense contractor by and large. That's their big ticket item. But they were building out a health market, and so I got to go do management consulting, but with and for scientists at the FDA, a little bit NIH, and it was awesome. I loved it. It was like I felt like a fish in water for the first time. I was like, oh, the things that everyone else seems to struggle with, organizing, managing, planning, building strategies and images and communicating those widely. These are kind of my thing. Newsflash. So there you go. You can be 30 before you figure out what you're good at. And so, yeah, I did some consulting for FDA for a few years. And then COVID hit. I had an 8-month-old and no childcare. And my husband and I were both working full time, and work was actually taking off more than slowing down. So we came back to the Bay Area, and I worked for a few mid to smaller sized biotechs, and realized the mid-size is also great. There's a ton to learn there, but I really like startup energy and culture. Again, the rapid boredom of my brain. So startup pace and vibe is very much aligned with how my brain works. And so I did some consulting for just as myself for startups for a while, and then joined a couple different companies. Now I'm at Gordian Biotech, Biotechnologies, and we tackle complex diseases of aging, and I'm our VP of operations. So it's a winding path, but I feel like every operator / generalist I know has a winding path.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is interesting to me because you talked about the startups, but then also the mid-size companies. Yeah, my view right now is that a lot of very small companies are spending a lot of time struggling, as well, just given some of the current issues with grant funding and things like that. I mean, what is your general view of those sort of things at this point in time?
I mean, yeah, it's not a mystery. The market is what it is, right? And I think there's, the danger of it is getting sucked into the market's so bad that nothing's doable. I don't think that's true necessarily. I think biotech's going through a slump. I think that slump is probably exacerbated by the high highs of the early 2020s, and there's a lot of companies with a lot of good data that are running out of funds. And it's not always the small companies, right? So I actually think right now I'd rather be a brand new, fresh startup trying to fundraise than I would be a company that maybe has been around for a couple of years and is trying to leverage the data they have already, because it's just a harder sell to get tens of millions of dollars together than it is to get a handful of millions.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an important point to cover as well, and I appreciate your perspective on that, because it's I feel like there are a lot of companies in different positions, and as we know, as you divide things up, it's easy inside of life sciences to say, look, for all life sciences, companies, it's hard. But if I go back to your first statement about the early 2020s, right? So I could think of a bunch of companies that were getting hundreds of millions of dollars in acquisition cost and things like that through the early 2020s, and funding in AI was easier and things like that. Still, if you were researching small molecules, though, or you were researching some other breakthrough drug, it's probably been hard for you since the 2020s. So there wasn't an ease, at those points in time. But yeah, I think our industry is so varied in terms of the things that you touch on that yeah, I mean, one size does not fit all here, and there are categories where small size could be an advantage. I could see that.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, kind of the ways that you're having to manage, though. I would imagine in your current operations role, right, you're probably having to think a lot big picture, but then also step back and take a very tactical look at certain things. How do you balance that in your career?
Yeah, I think that's what I like about startups too, is that you do have to think both tactically day to day and big picture. I am in a really cool position because I oversee a bunch of different things, right? Like HR, IT, environmental health and safety, facilities, R&D operations. The list goes on. And I love that I get to zoom in and out. It's part of what makes my brain happy. I have definitely more stress if I am stuck in one place or the other. I like that I can see big picture and then go do something tactically to make that big picture happen. And when I'm doing something tactically, especially when I am maybe not wild about that thing that I have to do anyway, if I can see the big picture purpose of it, I'm much more engaged and invested in it. I think that's one of the challenges that larger organizations have, is that scientists are trained for a very long time to be very critical and intentional thinkers. And then we put them in a large organization, ask them to get a project done, but they don't necessarily see where that project came from or where it's going or trying to go. And so, yeah, it's one of the selling points for startup to me, is that you do get to see more of an end-to-end story and you get to engage with the different parts of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about your role and what it is that you do. But also, I'm very interested in understanding any sort of initiatives that you have going on or challenges as well that you're currently facing.
Yeah, so I was brought in initially to just manage R&D operations, just to help, grease the skids, if you will. Scientists are incredibly good at problem solving and doing their work, and then you start to scale, and it's like, well, do our systems actually hold up to that next scale? Are we ready for partnering? Are we ready for investment or the next round of development? And so my biggest part of my role is really making sure that the people and the systems in our company have the support that they need to function as well as possible. So it's a little bit like your phone has an iOS, right? Your iPhone, you have an operating system. And when that operating system is working great, you don't even notice. That's operations. If it's not working great, it's an immediate cluster of your day, right? Like if when your phone's not working for you, it kind of messes everything up. So that's my view on my role, is I manage basically what makes life as a scientist hopefully easier, better, faster, and less stressful. Um, as far as current initiatives, I do a lot of different things, right? So there's the like keep the lights on, make stuff day to day, building lights, electrical, water happen. And then there's compliance, a lot of just making sure that we're coloring inside the lines where we have to. Um, and really just, again, those systems, making sure that they work for scientists and with scientists. Been doing a lot of ELN implementation for our team, and it's a pretty cool tool that it's called Kaleidoscope. That is actually more of a project management tool, but it is CFR compliant, Part 11 compliant, and so it's awesome because it ties project management to execution and to the actual data, like centralized database. So I'm designing and implementing our version of that. And it's, takes a lot of time and effort, but it's when my bench experience comes into play, because I have to think about how does a scientist actually work at the bench, not just what would a software designer think a scientist would do at the bench. So,
Yeah, it's I mean, I would imagine tools like electronic lab notebooks are very enabling for teams, but I also could see how it would help you with scalability as well. Um, Given your expertise in cross-functional team development and management, how do you facilitate collaboration amongst all these technical experts that you have as well?
yeah, I think the biggest thing in collaboration, especially with teams that you're going to work with for quite some time, is building trust. People have to trust that you are there to work with them, not against them. Trust and respect kind of go hand in hand. Mutual respect, ideally, is nice, but sometimes it's hard when you have a lot of experts. I saw this at FDA with review teams, that you have people that are experts in whatever their area is, and they don't necessarily see the world through their compatriots' eyes. And so when you're trying to get people to collaborate, a lot of it feels like interpretive dance sometimes, of like, I am going to explain to you why this person sees it this way, and I'm going to explain to you, and yeah, just facilitating that and making it not a grumpy experience, ideally. But yeah, the more you can build trust, the better. I find that if I bring my actual full authentic self to work, I am much more successful than if I am trying to be, the facilitator, let's say. And as a management consultant, there's a kind of an expectation that you come in like a suit and blazer or whatever. Biotech does not jive with that necessarily, right? So if you if you show up in a blazer to our office, I actually did it a couple weeks ago, and people were like, "Whoa, fancy!" Fully like sneakers, jeans, and a blazer, and I was like, "Okay, all right." Note to self: the blazer conveys information that I was not intending. So yeah, I think it's really just about winning people over to the fact that you're not there to be a blazer in the room.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, and I could envision like different companies thinking, oh, this person must have an interview today.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, no, our air conditioning is cold.
Yeah, yeah.
Just
Well,
keeping
it's
warm.
this or a hoodie. It's one of the two, the blazer or the hoodie. You gotta get one or the other. Uh,
Exactly.
So, what are some of the most significant trends that you see shaping the biotech industry in 2025, like precision medicine or digital advancements? And then how is Gordian Biotechnology responding to those?
Yeah, I mean, trends are funny, right? I would love to give you a straight up science answer. I think honestly, right now, AI and the intentional and appropriate use thereof, learning the rules of how AI plays for us, and learning how we protect our IP within an AI environment is a good one. I've seen in the past decade, just the influx of like tech culture and mindset and like go fast, break things. I'm sorry. Like there are patients on the other end of what we're doing. I am absolutely on board for go fast. I am not so on board for break things. I am absolutely on board for an early kill experiment. Do that. That's good science. But don't go fast and get into patients and hope you figured it out on the way, because that's just a shitty model, frankly, for healthcare. And I think there's a lot of like technical, obviously technical component to biotech and to what we do. It's a high tech environment. But I think there's this idea that like principles can be thrown out the window and core values are just something you put on your wall. And I am very hopeful actually that AI will shove us the opposite direction, in the same way that like Walmart made small mom and pop shops, endangered them, and then eventually people started craving the like human connection of going to a store and buying a bespoke thing. I am hopeful that, those core values that we say that we espouse, and like the principles and the ethics that should be at play in healthcare, I think that kind of tension between the people that do want to keep and value that versus the folks that are kind of willing to chuck it. I think that tension is going to be a big part of the future, and hopefully it moves in an ethical, positive way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, on the AI front, certainly we're seeing shifts even now, and I feel like what's interesting to me is even in some of the AI content and things like that we create for people, there are a lot of people that react to different things and that have said, hey, look, I don't like AI content, but at the same time, we certainly see a lot of trends where people are, using it and absorbing it and, responding to it and whatever. But at the same time, do I see it? Do I see the same level whenever I look at, a personal post that you sat down and spent time to write that actually communicates something about something that's happening in your world, in your life, whatever? Overall, no. There is a difference that I'm seeing in those two levels of content coming out from people. But I also, tell people all the time, like, look, the way that the algorithms of today, given all the content that's coming out from people, the way that they know who engages with your stuff is by sort of feeding them your stuff every day. And if
Yeah.
you're the type of person that once every couple months you want to post, unfortunately, you're going to be the person that gets no attention. And so that's just even worse, because you spent a couple hours writing the post or a day or whatever, and all of a sudden you click the button. Yeah, and nobody engages. It's really sad to have spent or wasted that time, given our
Yeah.
environment today. Yeah.
It says a lot about like immediacy, right? And like our brains are incredible dopamine machines, eating and spitting out depending on your biochemistry. But yeah, I think this is one of the dangers of like social media and LinkedIn being like the be all end all of who matters. I care a lot more about the person that posts once a month if what they post feels meaningful and impactful. I will follow that person regardless. I don't necessarily expect that person to push out 70 posts a month. The person that posts 70 times a month, you're getting muted, bro. Like, there's not a way in hell that you have something interesting to say 70 times a month. It's just not true. So yeah, I think it just comes down to like personal preference. Like, how do you ingest information and material? I love AI. I think it's fantastic in many ways. I use it as a tool. I'm like, how do I weaponize AI to make my life easier, better, faster? But I don't outsource my personality to it.
Yeah.
Which
No, it
is
makes a lot of sense as well. Yeah. So, um, How do you approach pragmatic risk identification and mitigation, especially in such a fast-paced and mission-oriented environment that you're in?
Yeah, I think a big part of risk ID and mitigation, like a lot of, large companies will have teams that kind of flag risks, and they'll have whole risk mitigation dashboards and spreadsheets and so on, and meetings to discuss. In a startup, it's kind of nice because you're dealing with fewer variables in some ways. There's fewer people. You're doing, fewer things. Still a lot, but there's not as much to manage. So a lot of what I do is keep my ear to the ground. I just be very present. I really understand what's happening, why. We communicate quite a bit on Slack, and I don't mute any of the channels. And that's probably not going to be the most popular answer, but part of my job is to kind of be the one that does quorum sensing, right? To understand what the hive is saying, thinking, doing. It's also back to trust and collaboration. Like I can only know what a risk is or if it's a real risk if people feel comfortable speaking to me about it. And so I try to open the door to as much feedback and discussion and input as possible. Yeah, I keep my ear to the ground. Compliance issues where you're like, oh, this is something that has to happen. Yes, you build systems and tools to or use them to make your life easier so that you know when compliance needs to be assessed and addressed. But the other things, the kind of more squishy risks and challenges, it really comes down to like, do people know to flag those, to say them out loud? Do they know who to talk to about it? And are you paying sufficient attention to catch the ones that maybe aren't being proactively communicated?
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about Gordian Biotechnology. What is it that you're working on, and tell us more about the company.
Yeah, so we have a proprietary platform for target identification, which is fantastic. And we are applying it across basically some of the more complex age-related diseases, right? So as we age, the incidence of disease increases. We don't necessarily know the exact how and why or the basic biology of that. But across the board, if have some like fibrosis is worse, obesity is worse, et cetera. And so we apply our target ID to screen in like true pathology rather than in models that have been kind of artificially produced, let's say. So one of our programs is in osteoarthritis, and we screen in horses who like naturally develop osteoarthritis. And the idea is that with our platform, and by using the actual pathology that's naturally present due to aging, we are more likely to see not just target hits, but target hits that mean something. You can screen for also, it's the joke, like we've cured cancer in millions of mice. And that's true, but that doesn't mean that we've cured it for people, right? And so I think these animal models, and this actually, my undergrad is in animal science at Davis, specifically in animal models. And our animal models are incredible in many ways, and they fall flat in many ways as well. I think we could argue that the lack of success in like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's to date is quite a bit to do with the fact that our mouse and rat models are not great. They just don't recapitulate the real disease state. And instead of getting more and more creative about how we induce animals to do the thing that we do naturally, there's a huge argument to screen in let's say, non-human primates that actually develop Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, for instance. And so that's, a big part of our work is doing that screening. And then we are progressing through, drug development and identifying drug candidates where we can across different programs.
Very good.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your sort of process for more complex problem solving. Whenever I think about your background with management consulting and other things, you come with this tool set of the capabilities to walk into an organization and help them sort of pick apart a problem. How tell me about a complex problem that you've solved, and then how did you approach it?
Yeah, the one that comes to mind that kind of addresses your, management consulting component is it was one of the first jobs after I left Booz Allen, and I was there doing program management and strategy. I worked for their R&D, kind of early R&D, and then I also worked on alliance management for this biosimilar partner that we had. So, not being able to mind my own business, generalist, welcome. I noticed that there was this string of emails going around about some like clinical shipment that had been delayed or didn't make it in time or something. And I talked to my boss and I was like, I have a little bit of bandwidth, but this looks like an issue. Like, how are we not getting stuff to the clinic quickly enough for this study? That feels nuts to me. And so she was like, yeah, you can dig it up. I don't know. This is one of the kind of eye openers of a startup that scales quickly and gets to like 1,000 people is no longer really considered a startup, right? But you're not big pharma. You're biotech. Are you mid-sized biotech? Kind of. And a lot of those companies are in this weird place where some of their systems are literally still duct taped together, and you can't, not that you can't get around it, but you don't have to until the duct tape gives out, right?
Right.
And their duct tape was giving out effectively because there had been some turnover, and the middle person that used to get emailed was no longer getting emailed or whatever. And so I also found when I talked to folks that there were different levels of understanding of like stress and tension and challenges within the system. So I actually got everyone together. I did my research ahead of time. I talked to everyone individually, and then I brought them together and I mapped out both the system itself, so like a visual map of, in the beginning, we start here and we go to, production. Production happens for this amount of time and then it needs to be, labeled and bottled and whatever, right? And so I drew out that whole map. And then across each team, I said, okay, how high is your stress during production? And the regulatory folks were like, 0. I don't know, not much. Like, we're just maintaining documentation. And then when it came time to do labeling, regulatory spiked a little bit, right? Because they have to have these conversations. And so I visualized like the happiness map, stress map, let's say, of everyone, the different groups over time, and showed them like at a time when you are high stress, this other group does not understand that. And when you are high stress, this group doesn't understand that. So we have to understand each other's workflows to be able to effectively help and support each other. And you do actually have to support each other to make this work. And I think it was eye-opening because each group had worked so much within their own lane and their own silo for so long that they just didn't understand that they were receiving something and handing something off, and what the impact was to the teams up and downstream. So that was one thing that we then not only mapped it, but like built a better system. And there were a lot of, it looked almost like you remember cell signaling maps where you're just like, there's arrows in and out and everything is different colors because at some point you run out of highlighters and you're like, Jesus, I don't even know what's happening anymore. It looked like that. And I was like, I feel like we can cut out a lot of this garbage and just have a better system. So yeah, it was, that was a fun one.
Honestly, and I think this is a brilliant example because, so many times you hear teams talking past each other. They don't understand the perspective from the other side of the field, right? So they think that maybe somebody has it in for them, or, there's some weird dynamic that's causing, team A to make it tougher on team B, right? But in reality, people just might not understand the perspective from the other side of the field, just very simply to put it in more of a sports analogy maybe. And when I heard in your example, because we do this thing with customer journey mapping where you sort of, mark like, where is the customer happy, where are they not happy, et cetera. In your example, what I'm hearing is a great way to communicate back to the team that, hey, here's kind of what this handoff looks like. And when people are maybe, have more anxiety because of, whatever's coming or whatever, got handed off. And yeah, I think it's a good way to leverage that capability too and more of an internal scale. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
So let's talk a little bit more about you. What's the greatest piece of leadership advice that you've ever received?
Ooh, yeah, I wrote down a couple because I was like, I don't want to forget this. Leadership advice is funny because I have gotten leadership advice from people that I would not call great leaders. And I've gotten advice from people that are amazing, obviously, as well. But it's funny. I always worry about being the person that hands out advice because nobody asked, right? So you're asking me. But I think leadership advice can be such a double-edged sword because if you say it, you got to live it, right? If you're going to give somebody that advice, know that you're on the hook. The biggest thing that I learned when I got into consulting, so straight out of my postdoc, was your goal is to take things off your boss's plate. The goal is to, make life easier for whoever manages you. And that sounds maybe a little enabling or whatever, but the idea is if you make your boss's life easier, you get to learn something because you get to do something that they don't want to do anyway and that you probably wouldn't have had a chance to do otherwise. And you build trust with them because you're getting stuff done. And then when you are in charge, you find very quickly that the people that proactively take things off your plate become your favorites very quickly. I'm not saying do that to the, detriment of anything else, but I think it's something that's often overlooked. Like take things off of people's plates. You build trust, you build experience, you build the reputation of being a person that can take something and run with it. And that's a big one. Intangibles have a tangible impact. I think again in like highly technical environments, everything becomes about, what's tangible, what data do we have immediately, who's doing what experiment, whatever. And the intangible part of like, how are people feeling about what's happening and how are they informed? Do they feel good? Are their, career aspirations being addressed or thought about? These are not things that are always, they're not tactile, right? Like you can't hold that in your hand, but they have a massive impact on culture and retention and general satisfaction with work, which tends to matter. So that's another one. I really love the idea that there are a lot of keys to success, but many of them are a lot easier and cheaper than you think. Being on time, be on time, show up prepared, bring a notebook and a pen to like write it down. Even if you never want to look at those notes again, writing something down when someone's speaking to you makes them feel seen, heard, and like they matter. It's just useful. And bringing solutions. It again, none of this costs money. It's free, and you can be incredibly successful just by. I tell my kids too. I'm like, please and thank you, cost you nothing, and they have a huge impact on you, your brain, and everyone else around you. So yeah, it's my ramble.
What I guess I would summarize maybe some of those with is, one, the whole person counts, right? So that's, the one way I would sort of summarize your, one kind of the empathy as well as, just the way that you think about people's emotions and other things, the whole person does count. And secondly, the this idea of being like the person that takes action, is proactive, that sort of thinks about, the complete picture. There's one particular project that I'm working on right now where we have people that focus on silos, and it's sort of it's forcing us to ask a lot of questions about like why would we continue to do this? Like if you're going to keep just thinking about your silo, then why, what is the bigger impact for the organization? Why would the organization continue to do the thing that we're working on? So it's one of those things that, if you want to focus on your silo, it's fine to sort of think of that, but then there needs to be somebody on the other side that's doing the same thing. Like whoever's pitching has to be willing to look at the catcher and make sure that they're ready to catch then. Because if the two
Yeah.
aren't in sync, it's not going to work organizationally either. You're gonna have a problem. And from an ops perspective, it's one of those things where you just sort of scratch your head and go, I don't understand this. Why do I only care about one side?
Yeah.
So yes, so important.
Well, and highly technical people as well. Like I have met some of the most incredible minds that can think in just the most abstract, fascinating ways. And then they're kind of stuck in other ways. And I think it's just we have to play to each other's strengths, right?
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of like individual contributors that are just, that's what they should be doing. Being individual contributors, it's how their brain is the most useful and helpful to themselves and to everyone, right? It's the highest impact. And then oftentimes what we do is brilliant scientist is brilliant. We reward them with giving them a team of other brilliant scientists to manage. And guess who hates managing? The individual contributor does not want to manage. And it's unfortunate because there is this, perception and kind of like setup that unless you manage, you are stuck. And it's like, well, I think depending on the organization, right? There's some that I've seen where it's like, yeah, if you're not a manager, you're going to make less and you're going to be stuck in your role. And there's other places where it's like we see the value of individual contribution. And so, yeah, leadership advice, I think if you're going to lead, you need to think about people, the upstream, the downstream, anticipate need, and teach people to be you. If you want to go do the next thing, someone has to take your place. And if you have not back trained somebody to take that role, it's a lot harder for you to go up, if that's your goal.
Yeah, absolutely. What inspires you?
I am inspired by, I don't know, it's like passion, people that are passionate about the things that they do, like know what they love and love what they do. I just yeah, it's also a startup thing, right? Where, founders are zealots in many ways, in the best way, ideally. And it's incredibly impactful and nice to work with people who fully are drinking the Kool-Aid. And I say that as like I know it's a culty thing, but I think it's it's inspiring to see people fully bought in, right? I think we live in a culture a little bit of like cynicism sometimes, and it can be kind of like hip to be, the cynic. And unfortunately, for me at least, cynicism leads to depression. And so I need people in my life that are fully bought into being excited and stoked about whatever they're doing. And it can be, I have mom friends who are like stoked on being stay-at-home moms. I'm like, hell yeah, cool. So it doesn't just have to be a biotech startup, just people that are passionate about things. Authenticity, I maybe it's the neurodivergent in me or of me, but I have a good bullshit sensor, and I really detest, I don't want to be in an environment where it's bull. So when I find someone or a group that is like authentically themselves, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And kindness, I think leading with kindness, again, maybe not sexy, maybe not like fully capitalism, but I think I think being kind and like having that be of value, even when, especially when stuff gets hard in the market, like it's easy to be mean to people. it's easy to be one of those recruiters that's like, how dare you apply? You don't know anything. You're like, well, good luck with that, man. Like that, you're gonna have a hard, hard couple years. I think it's inspiring when I see people leading with kindness, especially when it's easier or faster not to do so.
Yeah. Well, let's check in on the inverse of that. So what concerns you?
Concerns. Um, I I think the biggest concern I have is the like anti-empathy movement. I don't know. I have a trend here. It's going to make me sound like a lot nicer person than I am. My default is not necessarily to be the kindest, nicest, most empathetic person, but I find that like those are probably some of my worst instincts. And when I see and embrace empathy and kindness, my life is better and the people around me's life and my work is better. When I see this like empathy is garbage, empathy is toxic thing, I'm like, whoa, humans are communal. Like if we're gonna be scientists, first of all, if you don't believe in evolution, what are we doing? But if you do believe in evolution, you know that humans evolved to be communal. It's what kept us safe. It's what kept us and keeps us safe. And yes, we are tribal, but we are meant to be together. People by themselves, you look at mental health epidemic, all this fun stuff. The more we're alone and insular and in echo chambers, the worse off we are. And it just, what's the point of that? So yeah, concerned about like the growing trend of empathy is garbage. I think there's been a lot of like, what was it? I can't remember the phrasing that was used, but this idea of, yeah, like the anti-DEI of it all concerning to me. I'm not asking for a handout over here. I don't think many women in this space are. I think we've all worked pretty damn hard to get here. Nobody gave me my PhD. And then when you see people act like being, diverse is somehow a negative. It's like, again, the principles of biology indicate to us that hybrid vigor is a real thing. And so teams should also have hybrid vigor. I have trouble with the illogical circular thinking there.
And I've seen groupthink impact teams before, right? So I mean, I certainly have seen people that are all sort of in sync with each other, even somewhat diverse teams that don't have enough others perspectives that it gets to a point that it just, at the end, once you're all sort of saying the same thing and you don't have a different perspective, it's time to sort of question like what else should be different, because there's obviously too much of the same perspective in this room. So let's like look a little bit beyond as well. And whatever your way is of doing that, I don't really care if it's, look, I want to involve different races, different genders, different backgrounds, even if they're not different races, like a way to like get people that were impacted by different things to think about the same problem, that all of a sudden go, let's think about this in a different way. I mean, to me, that perspective is what helps you. I don't care what you want to call it at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, I've seen the same thing where, I've come into departments where they don't have enough other perspective. And then all of a sudden it's like, look, I mean, if we add a couple other minds here, I'd make sure that those minds are really used, not just sort of here to warm the chair. Um, it will help us all. and
Yeah,
it's amazing. So yeah.
I agree. Yeah, and I say DEI in like that's been the term for a while now. But yeah, I think that human beings come from different places and cultures and experiences, and it's not that everyone should have every voice all the time, but I do think that we're better when we work together, and that when we have diversity of experience, and I think it goes back to that point of authenticity. Like, do we have people that feel they can authentically contribute? Have we created a space with enough, psychological safety that allows somebody with a different experience to say, actually, I don't agree. And doesn't mean we have to pivot 100%, but we need to learn or relearn to disagree and to evolve thinking and yeah, I think groupthink within biotech feels inherently strange to me, or in life science feels strange, because the whole idea is to question openly and curiously and to test your hypothesis. And if it fails, it fails.
Yeah.
That's
Find
life,
another
right?
way. That's right.
Yeah. New
There's another
hypothesis.
solution somewhere. Exactly. The last question. What excites you?
What excites me? I am excited about the conversation about generalists. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's funny because I post about it sometimes and I get a variety of responses. Some people I get messages and they're like, this doesn't make any, like, every time I see generalist, it's just somebody that doesn't know how to describe what they do or doesn't do it very well. I'm like, all right, that's your experience. And maybe there's a some sort of qualifier that needs to go before generalist. But yeah, my experience is that we really are just, I don't know, I made the analogy like Swiss Army knife. I don't think a Swiss Army knife is useless. I think it's sharp, it's capable, has a screwdriver. Some of the fancy ones have a light. You can do a lot with that. I'll take that. But yeah, I think it's also hard to fully describe a Swiss Army knife in a resume, right? Like, how do you describe that? So I'm excited about like the ongoing conversation and evolution of what is a generalist. I have young kids and they are hilarious and exhausting and wonderful, all the things that parents experience with their kids. But I've been very excited by seeing them, I don't know, grow up in a different environment, a different educational environment, a different social environment than I grew up with. And just, they have someone at school that teaches them social emotional intelligence. So they're learning language about behavior and feelings in addition to their STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, math, guidance. That this is a public school. Go California. Woo woo. But yeah, I think it's inspiring and exciting to me that we are acknowledging and tying like art and tech and people skills together in a way that we should, I believe. And I get to see my kids grow up in that place. So I'm excited to see what kind of humans they are. And I hope that they will stop stress testing my drywall any day now, but we'll see what happens.
Well, thank you for sharing those. And Kristien Van Vlasselaer, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success podcast. It's great to, meet a Swiss Army knife like yourself. I'll just call you that now. And, it was great to hear about Gordian Biotechnology and everything that you're working on there. I really appreciate your time. And thanks again for coming and sharing your story.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, Don. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.